Welcome back to Arise, the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagoldo. Now to Cameroon, where armed separatist rebels have, for the past 3 years, been fighting for independence from the English-speaking parts of the country, or for the English-speaking parts of the country. This week, the separatists attacked villages in the French-speaking region, killing at least 7 people, possibly more. This is unusual since it's mostly Cameroon's Anglophone region that has seen violence over the last 3 years as rebels fight to cement an independent English state. The UN says the conflict has cost more than 3,000 lives and has forced 500,000 people to flee from Cameroon. It was in 1961, as the sun was setting on the British Empire, that British southern Cameroon merged with neighboring, formerly French Cameroon. Since then, the Anglophones, who are outnumbered 4-1, say the French speakers dominate the government and say their region is starved of investment. Well, for more on this, let's speak to the African Affairs analyst and publisher of Africa Briefing, John Ofe-Ansah. Good to see you, John. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. What do we know about this latest attack, first of all?
Well, it's just what you just said in your presentation. But the latest attacks, they attacked two functions. One be held to mark the International Women's Day on Sunday, and there was another two that was a political function that again, was attacked. But I believe this attack is a statement and a reprisal by the separatists, who are, like you said in the presentation, who are demanding their own self-government or their own country called the government of Bamenda. So, I mean, it is just a reprisal against the government, who have been accused of so many human rights abuses and so on and so forth.
Well, I mean, you and I have talked about this before on Arise News. I mean, we report regularly on violence and fighting in the English-speaking region, but those attacks took place in the French-speaking region. How significant is that?
It is signal because it appears the separatists are taking the fight to, the central government, in their own backyard, if you like, by attacking and mounting these attacks in the French speaking parts of the country. So they are sending a clear message to the government that, look, the fight is on and we're not going to give up until our demands are met.
And beyond the fact, John, that this suggests, as you said, that the conflict is escalating to other parts of the country, is that also going to change the way that many people in the country, especially those in the Francophone region, view the conflict?
It's got to be a mix. You see, number one, if these attacks continue, especially in their own backyard, the English-speaking areas, there's bound to be some alienation, amongst, from their own people, from their own English-speaking compatriots. And again, if the attacks, keep mounting the French-speaking countries too, I believe they are bound to be, counter reprisals from the state security forces. So the feeling, the sentiments are going to be rather mixed and maybe complex, if you like.
Is this likely to push the English-speaking regions to demand for their own separate states and sort of up the political agenda or down the political agenda?
Yes, well, they are demanding their own state because of the way they have been treated and marginalized by the majority French-speaking side, which again dominates, the central government. But in fact, last December, Parliament passed, a bill granting the two English speaking regions some of devolution, granting them more powers over education and justice policies. So this bill is now before the Senate, waiting for approval. So if the Senate passes this bill, then the English-speaking regions will have control over education and justice. And we mustn't forget that what sparked the current trouble 3 years ago was the introduction of French language in all the Anglophone speaking schools. This is what actually sparked the trouble. So at least it appears the government is trying to move halfway to meet their concerns. But I'm not sure that this bill is enough to satisfy the demands of the Anglophone regions.
And you talked about the things that led to this point. I mean, is there a sense that the separatists are enjoying greater support in Cameroon, at least in the Anglophone region? I mean, do people support the actions they're taking?
It appears they must have some support because if civilians are being become the victims of human rights abuses from the security forces, yes, it will increase the sympathy on their part for the agitation within that region. Okay, and should the attacks also increase, the separatist attacks in the Francophone region parts also increase, I think it is bound to again have some mixed results. Some might actually clamor for the government to grant the separatists request their demands in order to curtail such attacks. On the other hand, it could go to sort of antagonize the Anglophone separatists more. So again, it is very hard to gauge what the general reaction is going to be.
So just to be clear, John, you're saying that if these types of attacks, particularly on the French-speaking region, increase the call for the governments to do something about it, by doing something, does that mean acquiesce to the demands of the separatists, or crush the rebels, or call them to dialogue?
To answer this question, we must not forget or dismiss the intervention of foreign elements. Just last December, President Trump announced, terminated Cameroon's participation in AGOA, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which grants some African countries preferential trade benefits. It has been terminated from January 1st this year, right? And Trump cited the reasons being persistent gross violations of internationally recognized human rights. These are the words from President Trump. So with some pressure from the US and maybe some could come from France, it may push the bigger government, the central government, to meet most, if not all, of the separatist demand. But I'm not sure the government will agree to a complete cessation of the Western region into a separate country. I'm not sure that's ever going to happen.
Because, of course, in support of what you're saying, the government has put preconditions on any dialogue with the separatists. It insists that the country must not be split. I mean, does that make it more difficult for radical separatist groups to sit down with the government for talks?
You see, in matters like this, we shouldn't forget that it's posturing. I mean, the government will make will state their preconditions. The separatists will also state theirs. But again, they all mark their territories, they mark their preconditions, and it is up to them to negotiate, here and there before they sit down. But I'm not sure that the government will agree to a complete, breakaway into a new state, by the separatists. Whereas again, the separatists too might also ask for some, might state their preconditions, which I hope the government may try to move, to compromise, to meet them halfway in order to set the negotiations going.
And just to get a sense of history, John, for those of our viewers who may not know the nuances of sort of politics and history in West Africa, just remind us of why the merger between the English-speaking region and French-speaking Cameroon in 1961 has become an unhappy marriage, if you like, today.
It's Cameroon, present-day Cameroon, again, is a creation of the former colonial powers, Britain and France. I think at independence, there was a referendum, whether the two parts will be separate countries or not. But the referendum, where they voted in favor of one country. But since then, the French-speaking majority, as we all know, has been suppressing the English-speaking minority for a long time, leading to the latest, the current crisis that we see happening. So in a nutshell, this is what happened. It's a creation of the colonial powers.
And the United Nations, as we mentioned at the outset, says the conflict has cost more than 3,000 lives and has forced 500,000 people to flee from Cameroon, some of them, of course, fleeing into Nigeria here. What's your best guess of what's likely to happen next? The war continues, does it?
Well, it continues until, they compromise. Each side compromises on their preconditions. I mean, it will continue. But even then, whilst, we should forget that the government called for talks last November, which was boycotted, by some of the separatists, the leaders of the separatist movement. So I think the feeling or the willingness on part of the government, I believe, is there. But,
okay.
The problem, some of the problem is the intransigence of the
right. We must take a break, John. I'm sorry to interrupt you.